Hello, everyone, and today we're going to make a little project called a quiz game. And someone in the comments, I believe, of my panels and my data grid view, I won't be specific, asked how to select through different panels and pages so they can do different setups. So, what I'm going to do here is kind of basically set up multiple different things so that we can kind of make it look like pages in a kind of a panel. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna have two buttons. We're gonna say we're gonna go to its properties. We can right click properties, and we're gonna name this back, and we're gonna name this continue. And with that, we're going to then click this, and we're going to make these. So initially what we're going to do is we're going to do an on forms. And we're going to, really, if you want multiple different panels and you can flip through them, what I would suggest, instead of placing all these panels on top of them, you make them dynamically in the code. So what you would do, I would do, is a struct quiz questions, and what I would have in here would be a panel display. I'll just name it display. I'll have a checkbox, we'll have a selection A selection B, selection C, and selection D. Then we will have we'll have the selected things. I would do a label the question. And this is a very, very basic. I'm just going to show how you can flip between different ones. And with this, what I want to do is essentially make a list. Oops, not a list. A list of quiz questions. Questions equals new list of quiz questions. And what we're going to do when we load is we are going to do a for int I length. Let's do 10. Let's do 10 questions, and we're going to do a quiz questions. Temp equals new quiz questions. And by the way, do not forget to make them public, because if not, we will not be able to have access to them. And with that, so now with those quiz questions, we can then do temp.display. Oh, oops. Dot display equals new panel. So once you add this panel, unless you decide where you want it in the forms, it'll default at 0, 0, and that's what we're just going to leave it at. I'm going to do a temp dot selection A dot text. Well, first of all, I got to figure out the questions. well, for now, maybe we shouldn't just do a loop because we're going to have to do this manually, but I'm pretty sure you could find a way to do a loop. We could do temp. Let's do Control C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Temp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's just do 8. I know I said 10, but I lied. So with that, we would do the first one, temp. Let's just do these by variables so you guys can see what's going on. So I did a new panel. I'm going to do the temp dot question dot text equals, well, first of all, we would do a new label because we want to dynamically create it. So then we would do temp question equals, or dot text equals what is 4 bytes. And then we can do selection a text equals integer temp dot selection b dot text equals a short temp dot c dot text equals a boolean. Well, first of all, we got to make sure that we can that we do this correctly. We equals new checkbox. We'll do the same thing for selection B. And then the same thing for selection C. And then with that, we can then do I lost my train of thought. And then we can, with that, we can now do temp, or we can do temp dot display dot control controls dot add, and we can do temp dot questions, the question. So before that, it's just going to default at 0, 0, which is fine. We can deal with that right now. So but for right now, let's just do these two. And then what we can do is then do this dot controls dot add temp dot display. And with that, if we load it up, there we go. We have a panel, and it's saying what is 4. What is 4? Oh, well, we needed to make it a. We need to make its width a little bigger. So what we could do is temp dot the question dot width equals 60. Well, more like 100 or 1,000. I know that's a little much, but it just depends on how many different char characters you're gonna do. So with that, we can probably do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we could do probably a width of 100. I don't really see a problem in that. Yeah. So a width of 100. So what's the byte? So there you go. So now what we can do next is we can always add a second. What we're going to do is do a we're going to put the question below for the check, or the checkbox is below the question. So what we would do here is then we would do a temp dot select or selection a dot location equals new location. Oh, new point, excuse me. So location is your XY in the panel. So once you make a new point, I'm going to leave the X being 0, and we're going to bring this down by 30. And we're going to do this for the rest of them as well. 30, 60, and then 90. A, B, and C. And then we could do the same thing we did with that. 1, 2, 3, and just do temp selection A, temp selection B, temp selection C, and that will be in the display. So once we load this up, we will have all of them there. So, but now you see that the panel is quite short. So let's go back and make the panel temp dot display dot width. It will be around let's say 200 by 200. The width and height will be 200 by 200. And now that it's 200 by 200, we can then we can't see it right now, but what we can do next is we can see it. But now that we have it in the panel, we can decide what it is and whatnot. We're really not going to make the quiz really, but we're just going to show you how to switch to the different ones. So we have a continuum back. So what we can do now is we can make essentially we can just make this again. Control C. We can make that panel. We can just do temp 2, 2, 2, 2. You know, it's the most like amazing thing is just do 2. You could do an alt, but you know, I like to suffer. And with that, we can do who is the greatest? Me, you, the sky, and then we could do is also we can do temp number 2 dot display. So now we have both of them, but both of them are going to render at the same time, and you'll see how they're gonna overlap each other. Yeah. So, oops. No, we want temp 2, temp 2, temp 2, temp 2. Did I get all that? So with that, because of that, if we switched it, that would be in the back. So whatever's first will display first. So what we can do then is that we can do a button 1 is I think it was continuous button 2. So what we could do is that we could do a 4 int I length. Well, we could do something even better, and that's my fault. So once we add those, we made that list, right? We made that list of questions. Dot add. Then we could do is temp1. Okay, we can add this. And then temp2 questions add. And with that, we can then blah blah blah. This will display now. It's both saved, and so what we can do now is to differentiate what it is. We could do a string. Oops. Oh, it's still running. We could do a public string name, and with that we can name this we can do a name. We can make the name, and we could just do it equals question 1. What we also can do is outside we can have an int num questions. So that we could always know what question we're on. We could always go back to it. So when we do click button 2, we could do for int I questions dot length, or count would be more accurate. If questions dot questions well, if we do questions count, I am just not in questions dot or sub I. What we can do is if I equals num questions, then what we can do is we could do questions dot sub I dot panel display equals dot enabled equals true, and then we would do num questions plus plus, and then we would break. So then else we would make sure that all the rest that were previously on were false. So with that, I had to pause for a second because something happened, and I realized something that we shouldn't be doing is we don't need a for loop. Essentially, we need all that number of questions is that, and so what we would do is we would do questions, number of questions display, false, send it back, and then the next one we would send to front. And what I did below it, I didn't realize that why it was always rendering is because I had temp2 first, and temp1 was always in the first one, turning it off, making temp2 always render. So with this, if we do an update on the controls, and if we run it and we have an integer and we do continue, it'll switch to the next one. So with that, we could do a back button and say if num questions is less than 0 or is greater than 0, then what we can do is this. So if we did something like this and we started it, well, we wouldn't +1 it, we would -1, and then we would do a -1. So if we did a continue and we did it back, well, oops. Again, that's what happens when you copy and paste. You would do -, and then if you did a continue, then you did it back, you wouldn't have to get the error anymore. So, or you could do the same thing with this. It would be greater than if it's less than questions.count, then we can then do that. So with that, we can then do, we have a forward, which so if we end up doing questions count -1 with corresponding to our numbers index, I can't. Then when we load it up, we will not be able to go any back, and we can go back and forth to all the questions. You can, obviously, you can disable these if you don't want them to continue, and then it will load up at the end of the program. But essentially, that is how you do it. You could just do the same thing, keep adding them at the bottom. Like I said, you could add whatever control that you need and put it into the panel, and then you can enlarge the panel. So before we go, I wanted to say that we could. It's really hard to see where the panel is. So if we go and do temp temp1 dot display dot border style equals border style dot fixed 3D, you can decide what you want. Is when it loads, you can now you can see how big your panel is. So let's do this with temp2 as well. So with that, then you can know exactly where your panel starts and your panel begins, and then yeah. So with that, this is basically how you would dynamically keep adding pages and keep adding controls, and you could do a lot of this. You could have you can do a lot, and yeah. So with that, I hope you enjoy. I hope you found this very, very informative. And if so, I could hope if you could like, comment, and subscribe. That would be fantastic. And if with that, if you have anything else that anybody needs to learn or needs some more clarification, I would be more than happy to help them learn it. So with that, guys, have a great day and see you later.